It's happening now. Yeah, oh, you're missing it's over.
Yes.
Hit record on mine when you start yours.
Can you stand up there so I can see?
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to have our press conference regarding our deputy-involved shooting over in Spring Hill, just a couple of roads down. We have Sheriff Nieheis here and Sheriff Nacco, and they're going to discuss how the two incidents kind of intertwine and how we wound up here today.
Good afternoon. Again, for the record, Sheriff Al Nieheis. It's spelled Nienhuis, and it's pronounced Nieheis. And I have Sheriff Nacco here with me from Pasco County, and Mark Burtnell from FDLE, and they'll both be talking a little bit about their areas of that they're in charge of and things that happened in their county and so forth. As with most of these things, there's a couple ground rules that I need to say. Number one is that the information now is extremely preliminary. FDLE is actually right now interviewing some of the deputies involved and working on their investigation. So the information we're getting is extremely preliminary and subject to change at any given moment. So I want to go on record as that. The second thing is there's a lot of crimes oftentimes that are intertwined, and this is no exception. This actually kind of started in Pasco County with a home invasion. Sheriff Nacco can talk a little bit more about that later, but it happened either late last night or early this morning. Of course, through their investigation, they developed some leads and some suspects, and were actually, that kind of led them to Hernando County. About 6:45 this morning, not too far from here on Hollyhock, or Dandelion actually. On Dandelion, we had a vehicle arson, a fire that we believed to be intentionally set, and it was an arson. And so we were investigating that. Unbeknownst to us, it was related, it turned out to be a stolen car, and somehow related to that home invasion that occurred in Pasco County. Around that same time, or later on, later this morning, early this afternoon, Pasco found a couple individuals, suspicious individuals that were they believed to be related to the home invasion on their side of the county at a gas station on County Line Road here. One of the individuals had some burn marks. Ironically enough, one of those individuals, you may remember, we had a case here where a subject was shooting a dog with a BB gun and shot that dog several hundred times, and that person is involved in this too, and actually relayed to us that one of the suspects, a male in this case, was possibly at the house on Hollyhock. Detectives, working with Pasco detectives and so forth, were in the process of trying to get a search warrant to find out if that individual actually was on Hollyhock. In the meantime, while the search warrant was being obtained, we had a couple of my detectives in the area, plainclothes detectives, driving around the area just patrolling to see if they see the individual, make sure he didn't leave the house on Hollyhock. They actually stumbled upon this individual who apparently recognized them as law enforcement. They went down the street, got their vests on because obviously the person is a suspect in a violent crime in Pasco. They got their vests on, came back, and were looking for him. About the same time, we were getting reports of a suspicious person jumping fences and so forth in the area, and actually ended up on a house on Bancroft, where this individual went into this house uninvited, did not know the individuals. There were a couple elderly people there and a couple children who actually ended up hiding in the bathroom, I believe. The individual ended up in the garage. Deputies went to the garage and were getting ready to see if they could figure out if somebody was in there or not. And it's the preliminary information, he started actually shooting out the garage at the deputies. About that time, or just prior to that, with the detectives, a canine from Pasco was obviously a lot closer than one of my canines. He was in the area. And at least 4 deputies, 3 of my deputies and 1 of the Pasco deputies were actually involved in returning fire. The person exited the house, the suspect in this case, and he was running down the street it was Davenport, and almost got to Cobblestone, about a house away from Cobblestone on Davenport. And he was shooting at deputies and deputies shooting back, and he was struck by at least 1 round that we know of, and he was taken to a local hospital, and he's since been pronounced dead. A little information, we're not going to release the identity of this person just yet, but a little information on this individual. It's my understanding from talking with our cohorts in Pasco that this person was a documented gang member, had an extensive criminal history. He was actually released from prison May of last year, May of 21. He's had ag assault on a first responder, charges of kidnapping, robbery, and I think there were a host of others, but those are a couple of the top ones. And as I said, he is deceased. As with all police deputy-involved shootings, particularly if the person is deceased, we call FDLE. Even if they're not deceased, we do, but in this case, he is deceased. We call FDLE. They come in and take over the criminal investigation. And so those deputies, I'm sure Sheriff Nacco's the same, will put my 3 deputies, and I'm sure he will also put the deputies on administrative leave pending the outcome of this case. It's also my understanding there's some video that we'll probably be able to get to you later, maybe some body-worn cameras from Pasco, as well as some surveillance video in the area of the shooting that we might be able to release with the permission of FDLE, since they now have the case, the criminal case. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Nacco, and maybe he can talk a little bit more about the home invasion and what kind of precipitated all that investigation. So Sheriff Nacco.
Thank you. I want to thank Sheriff Needheis and Hernando County Sheriff's Office, with our members working along, and Special Agent in Charge Mark Brunell, FDLE. I can tell the heroism of the law enforcement officers is second to none, and the work they did out there, just tracking down these individuals, turned out to be very violent individuals, was tremendous. It's sad there's any loss of life. At the same time, is the suspect dictated our actions. Had he turned himself in, had he given himself up in handcuffs and just said, hey, I'm done, it would all been fine. He started shooting at us. He started shooting at law enforcement officers. They had to defend themselves, and that's what they did. This all precipitated from early this morning around 2:30 a.m. And like Sheriff Needheis said, this is all still preliminary information. A lot of information we still cannot release at this time. Around 2:30 a.m. In Hudson, so it was around 52 in Moon Lake area, about 12 miles from here. There was a home invasion robbery. There was an 89-year-old male who was at home. We do not know if he had any connection with these individuals. They go into the unlocked house. We believe there was 2 females and a male there. The one female we believe was outside, was the driver. Inside the house went the male and one of the females. They tied him up. They stole his vehicle. That was the vehicle that ends up the arson was involved in. And they took off. So this is where the detectives come in. The detectives did a phenomenal job searching the area, looking for videotapes from anywhere, linking it all together, and that's what they did. And that's where we partnered up with Hernando, because we started putting these pieces together and realized it crosses over the county lines. And that's the one thing. Law enforcement officers, we're going to work together, because criminals know no boundaries. And so we're going to work together to solve this, to help the victims of the crime. The elderly man, he's 89 years old. He's okay. He was able to free himself at that scene, and that's when he called 911. So, I'm just going to piggyback some of the things Sheriff Needheis talked about. The Pasco Sheriff's Office will be releasing the body-worn camera from our member. We already talked to FDLE about that. It will be released. They're working on it right now. On that, you will see heroism. You will see discipline. You will see training. That's what came into play. As this is going on, our members were getting information there were people in that house. The individual was shooting outside the house. Make no mistake about this. If the individual started firing rounds that were going inside the house, we would have attacked, we would have gone inside that house, we would have neutralized the suspect, and we would have rendered aid. We would not have hesitated at all. But all those rounds were coming out. And they were trying to, they were not going to fire rounds into that house God forbid, hurting anybody, innocent victims inside that house. That discipline was unbelievable, what you will see on this video. The other part of it too is, after the suspect was shot, they did render aid. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his wounds, but it goes back to what I said before. His actions dictated our actions. His actions of shooting at us, we will return fire. Make no mistake about that. This is one of those things that I go back to. In our society, unfortunately, there are people out there that will harm law enforcement, that will do everything they can to harm law enforcement. This individual's record, as Sheriff Neen has talked about, he was a convicted felon, known gang member, ag assault on Leo, robbery with a deadly weapon, kidnapping. These were things that were in his background. This is the type of individual that no matter how much we pleaded with him to give himself up, he did not want to do that. I go back to it, thank God that none of the innocent victims were harmed. We are getting them with the chaplain corps, with victim advocates. They will be consoled because this is a traumatic event for them. Same with our members. They will be out on administrative leave, but at the same time, this is traumatic for them and their families also. So we'll be getting them help too. This is what it goes back to the holistic part of law enforcement. We train people, we put them out in, unfortunately, very dangerous situations, and then afterwards, we have to help them because there's a mental health component. The mental health component for the victims, and mental health component for our members, for both agencies. So this is where we work together, this is where we're hand in hand, and this is where we recognize in our community we are going to ensure that you're safe. We're going to work as hard as we can, and those members put their lives in harm's way to protect our community, and I thank them for their heroism. With that, I want to bring up Special Agent in Charge Mark Brunell, FDLE.
Thank you, Sheriff. Again, Mark Brunell with FDLE here in Tampa. We have a memorandum of understanding with both Hernando County Sheriff's Office and Pasco Sheriff's Office to work any of their officer-involved shootings, and obviously we have that today. This is, as both sheriffs have said, a very fluid situation, preliminary. We do have some digital evidence that we will be releasing through the Sheriff's Office here shortly. We have a crime scene, active crime scene to work. We have several witnesses to interview, officers that were involved in the shooting to interview, witness officers, civilian witnesses. We have a lot of stuff going on now, so I think it's important to just let the facts come out as they do, and we'll get to the bottom of it. We're working with the 5th Circuit State Attorney's Office. We will write a very comprehensive report when we're complete, provide them with that, and they will render any decisions. To echo Sheriff Nako's statements earlier, this had the potential to be very, very bad. They had 4 people, innocent victims, in the house minding their own business in the midst of a home invasion. And these deputies and detectives showed great restraint. Unfortunately, they had to use deadly force, and that's why we're here. And so we will investigate this from beginning to end and turn over our findings to the State Attorney's Office. With that, I'll turn it back over to Sheriff Nienhuis. Thank you.
Just to give you a quick timeline, we originally called out with a suspicious person when the deputy saw the individual. It was about 1:20 this afternoon. About 1:50 is when they were engaged. The shots were fired, and the person was in custody at about 2:05 this afternoon. So things happened fairly quickly. Obviously, a lot going on. We're still trying to figure out what exactly occurred, but we probably won't be able to answer a lot of questions, but any of the 3 of us, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to try to entertain those.
Sure. But when we talk about the suspect in this case, so he was in jail and was released in May of 2021. Why was he in jail, and what's the reasoning for his release?
I'm not sure about which cases, the previous ones that led him to be in jail or prison at this time, and why he was released. We'll still get that information. We're still notifying next kin before we can provide you his name and date of birth. But it goes back to the fact these are very dangerous individuals. These are people that, he has a long history, as you heard, in there for 11 of the last 16 years. And so, this is somebody that obviously was not going to go back. And this is unfortunately what we're dealing with in society now. We're dealing with people that, are going to harm law enforcement. They don't care about life. This is one of those things that is making it scary for law enforcement officers out there, because we used to be able to go out there and people would just say, okay, I understand, I'm going to give myself up. That used to be way unfortunate. It used to be. Now more and more you're seeing violence. You're seeing the violence towards law enforcement. This guy's individual background, ag assault on law enforcement, the kidnapping, the armed robbery. This is a very violent individual, and these are the ones that need to be in prison. These are the ones that need to stay in there. Those are a drug addiction, a mental health issue. We need to get them help because that's a healthcare issue. But this is a very violent individual. These are the ones that I think we can all agree upon need to stay in prison.
Sheriff, when the suspect was shooting at deputies from the garage, I believe, when deputies were shooting back, were the individuals inside the home in any danger of being hit by any gunfire? Do you know?
From my understanding, although Sheriff Newton has follow up on this, from my understanding, talking to the deputies, watching the video, all the rounds were coming out. Sheriff Newton has deputy took around the glass, but all the rounds were coming out. And that's why I go back to the point. Every round that was being fired was coming out. They were very fearful of returning fire inside, because if they were going to return fire inside, we did not want to hit somebody, an innocent person. But let me go back to that other point. Had, God forbid, they heard shots being fired and a lot coming out, they would have charged inside that house, they would have neutralized that suspect, and they would have rendered aid. That is the training that we do. I know Sheriff Nienhuis does it, but that is something we do in Florida, that we do not wait, we do not sit outside, we will go into those hot situations.
Can you explain a little bit more about the home invasion that happened in Hudson? In terms, you had mentioned that they stole the elderly man's car. Was there anyone else that was in that car as well?
So he was inside the house. They had stolen the vehicle along with some other items inside. You know, as our detectives caught up with them later on and identified them, you know, we saw some of the stolen items. So we clearly linked the two females to that home invasion robbery from earlier.
And so those people are also arrested?
They're in custody right now. We're interviewing them.
Sheriff, I'm confused about. I'm going to say his name, Jamie Lynn Kujawa. Is that how it's pronounced? He's the person you referenced, Sheriff? Is that right?
Which
the dog, the person who was.
There was one of the female. Yeah, one of the females that was involved, and we're not sure exactly how, but and the house that we were going to on Hollyhock was related to that crime with the shooting of the dog with the BBs, the several hundred rounds into the dog's paw. I'm not sure exactly how they were related, but my deputies were saying that at least one individual in that house is the individual who's arrested on that. And it's my understanding that the person didn't show up for court today, so you can draw your own conclusions on that. But we're still trying to get to the bottom of exactly who's involved and how. But they were definitely related.
So, Sheriff, to confirm, one suspect dead, 2 women in custody, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of them had gang ties, or all of them are connected to it?
The only one we're sure of, I think, is the deceased had documented gang affiliations. Yes.
Do we know if the stolen car was used to commit any other crime?
No, I don't think there was not that we know of. I don't think there was a whole lot of time because it was 6:44. You know, when the home invasion occurred, 6:44, we found the car burning. We didn't know when we first found it. We figured it was an arson. We weren't surprised it was a stolen vehicle, and it was near Hollyhock on Dandelion. And then, you know, as the day unfolded and the detectives started talking to each other, it all started unraveling as to what likely occurred. And then, fortunately, some keen investigative work in Pasco finding those females and getting even more information, and then putting 2 and 2 together and realizing that this particular male was one of the ones involved. So.
And the women that were found, those were the people who had bird marks at that gas station?
At least one of them, yes.
Was it a break-in in the home invasion, total break-in, or how did that go
I think
down?
it was
Or knock
unlocked,
on the
you
door
said.
and how you lure somebody out?
There was a door that was unlocked, and they went in through an unlocked door.
And what do you preach all the time?
As I say, I mean, it goes back to lock your doors, lock your car doors, lock your home doors, and that's where we're going back, trying to talk with the victim in that case to see if there was any relation between himself and those suspects that were involved, to find out why that house was picked. And I'll tell everybody, the vast majority of the time in a home invasion robbery, they know who they're going after. It's usually a house where they have a relationship with somebody. They know there's something of value in that house, and that's why that house is targeted. I'm not saying in this case we don't know yet, and that's why we're working. Why was this house selected? However, it was unlocked, and that's what led them to get into that house.
Were there any deputies injured at all?
The only injury that's been reported so far is what I'm told is a very minor laceration from some glass that may have been the result of a bullet going through some glass and hitting the deputy in the face near the eye. Fortunately, it does not appear that the eye was damaged, and that deputy was at the hospital. I'm not sure what the prognosis is yet, but I was told at least preliminarily it was a very minor issue compared to what it could have been, obviously.
They live up in their cars? Is that how that?
What's this?
The SWAT cars? Did they have?
Yeah, again, you can imagine in something like this, in a very short period of time, there is a tremendous amount of confusion going on, and trying to figure out where the bullets are coming from. And as Sheriff Nacco said, trying to evaluate what your next course of action is, and trying to take cover. And at least the preliminary information I had, and this is not verified, that one of the rounds may have come out towards the deputies through some glass, and that glass may have nicked one of the deputies who was close to that door to get ready to go in and check the garage, I believe is where it was. Again, that's not verified though.
Oh, excuse me one second. I'm going to follow up on that one too. So having watched that video, I mean, I get it. People can watch TV shows, people can watch movies, and they think what the real life is, and it's not the real world. I can tell you what you saw, what you will see. Once that is released later on, what you will see is absolute heroism. You will hear the deputy, the Pasco deputy that's involved, you know, saying, hey, the round just came past our head. You will see the Hernando deputy, you know, the glass coming at them. You will see this stuff. And I'll tell you, you talk about brave women and men that will put themselves in harm's way to protect other people. That's what this is all about. That's what this video showed. It showed heroism out there. And I mean, they go back to cover. You know, you hear somebody yelling, get your helmets on. Those rounds are coming in. They get your helmets, calling for shields, calling for equipment. So, you know, when everybody hears out there about, you know, law enforcement, they need equipment, they need tools. Well, training is critical. To have training, you need the equipment too. And those equipment save lives today.
What type of weapon? Do we have that? Can you release that yet?
I saw the weapon. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but it was a handgun. We'll say that much. Of the suspect, yes.
And the deputy who was injured by the glass, is that Hernando?
Yes,
Okay.
that was a Hernando County deputy. So, you know, as Sheriff Nacco said, you just can't really imagine how much chaos is going on when rounds are being fired and deputies are pulling up trying to figure out, and you can imagine pulling up to a scene. You don't have the luxury of watching TV and having all the background of what happened in the last 5 minutes before you got there. So as deputies are pulling up, it can be very chaotic. And as Sheriff Nacco said, it takes a tremendous amount of courage to jump into those types of issues.
So
yes, ma'am.
It was both Hernando and Pasco County deputies that were there at the shooting.
Correct. It was a Hernando Pasco County K-9 that happened to be close because we were calling for K-9, and our K-9 was quite a ways away. And obviously, we had the suspect in a very small geographical area, so we wanted to get K-9 there as quickly as we could. And of course, Pasco is quick to help us out, and we go south into Pasco to help them if they need anything. If we happen to be on the south end of our county, we'll go in to the north end of their county, and vice versa if they ask for help.
Can you say,
go ahead.
Can you say how many were there altogether at that scene?
Well, there were several deputies there at different times as it's unfolding, you know, arriving. But initially, there were 4. That I'm told initial reports are that 4 deputies fired their weapons. Rather, 3 of them are Hernando County deputies, and 1 of them is that Pasco K-9 deputy.
Sure. The Photon stolen car, is that still there? And what was the intersection again? Dandelion?
It was on Dandelion. I don't know the exact address. I was just getting a lot of quick information before I got here, and since it was 6:44 this morning, I'm sure that it was processed. And again, all that occurred before I'm not even sure if it was in the system reported stolen. It probably was. We probably found that out pretty quickly. But at that point, there was nobody around it. We didn't know who the suspects were. Pasco was working it on their end. We knew we had the car shortly thereafter that was involved. We certainly didn't know, at least initially, it was involved in Hollyhock until we started talking to the other 2 suspects, or Pasco started talking to the other 2 suspects in Pasco County, saying that Hollyhock was related, and one of the suspects might be in Hollyhock. But he obviously wasn't there when we were trying to get the search warrant. He was actually running and ended up over on Bancroft. So.
Sheriff, did the suspect escape from the back of the home, or do we know how he got out of the home?
That's still we're still trying to figure it out. It looks like he may have come out the back because the deputies are being interviewed by FDLE, but it looks like he may have come out the back of the house and then got out on Davenport, I believe it is, and he got out on Davenport, and he was actually on the side of a yard when he was engaging deputies out in the open, and that's where he was shot and fell down there, and then was treated by deputies initially, and then EMS taken to the hospital, and he was pronounced at the hospital.
Have the 2 women been cooperative so far in the questioning? Do we anticipate charges?
The females?
Yeah.
Obviously, there was some cooperation there, but I don't know if Sheriff Nacco wants to talk about that, but that's still very fluid too, and obviously that's kind of secondary to this. But
yeah, as of right now, they are talking to our members. We pretty much got them on the scene with stolen merchandise, so there really wasn't much for them to have to admit to that we already discovered. But it goes back to our detectives. I give them total credit Those detectives started from the beginning of the day, started putting pieces together, work with Hernando, getting us all together. But yeah, I would, let's see how this goes, but I wouldn't be surprised if there will be charges coming up. But I give those detectives kudos. Outstanding job by them, because we probably would not be here today had it not been for their hard work.
Sheriff, can you say the gang that this suspect was affiliated with, and is this a gang that poses trouble in Pasco County that you guys are actively tracking?
So I don't want to get into that yet. We will get that to you because we want to make sure we have all the information. It was the information that came through. We want to verify that with DOC, Department of Corrections, to make sure that information is correct. But we will get it. It says gang member. We want to verify which gang it is. We have some preliminary information, but I don't want to say it until we actually know the exact one. Look, every community deals with gang issues. You know, I know traditionally everybody think, oh, it's the Bloods, the Crips. They will come up with those names because those are the things that, you know, Hollywood publicized a lot, whether it be, you know, Latin Kings, other ones out there. But at the same time is, you know, there could be just a neighborhood clique. Any clique of kids hanging out together, or adults that are in a group, you know, that consider themselves a gang, they can call themselves, you know, whatever street it is. So we treat them all the same, and the fact that if they're out there committing crimes, especially violent crimes, they're always going to be a threat to any community.
Yeah, I do have an update. I was just provided with an update. The car is still on Dandelion. It's a 223 Dandelion. If any of you want to get any video of that, the car is still there per our comm center. So.
And do you have the address for where the home invasion happened in Hudson?
So we're refraining from giving that out because of Marcy's Law. So that 89-year-old individual, we don't want to release the information.
All right.
223 Dandelion?
Yeah, 223 Dandelion, that's correct. That's the location of the arson. All right, thank you all very much for coming out. We certainly appreciate our partners in the media. If you have any questions, you can get with our respective PIOs. They'll be happy to follow up on those things we are able to release and get you that information. Again, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Sheriff.